Welcome to Old Man Gaming, the series where I nerd out on video games, from my GenX youth starting with early platforms like Pong and the TRS-80, through today with Xbox and PlayStation. In this episode, I'm going to be using my Atari flashback console to play Skydiver with a very special guest, my late millennial niece. The Atari 2600 was by far the most popular home console of the late 70s and early 80s, and for the time, it was expensive. Wikipedia tells us that the system itself originally retailed for around $190, which in modern currency is closer to $850. What you got for that price seems ridiculously bad by modern standards, but as someone who was there at the time, this first wave of games that had this similar, blocky, four-color look to them was beyond awesome. The quality would improve later, around the time some of the game developers left Atari in protest to start Activision, but that's a topic for another video. An important detail from these late 70s cartridges you can see from the box art. Note that it says 5 video games. Really, that meant 5 modes, which we'll walk through here in a minute. But the marketing language of that was deliberate in an attempt to convince parents of the value of an individual cartridge by artificially claiming it had more than one game on it. The original Skydiver was a 1978 Atari coin-op game created entirely by Owen Rubin, and had the very cool custom controllers that resembled parachute ripcords. Image from Arcade Hunters with a link to an article of theirs in the description below. Rubin would go on to create other coin-op titles like Battlezone and Major Havoc. A list of his full catalog is available over at Arcade History, link in the description below. The 1979 port of Skydiver to the Atari 2600 was done by Jim Huether, who would go on to work on a ton of sports-related titles for the Sega Genesis. There's a nice interview with him over at Digit Press, link in the description below. The gameplay for Skydiver is simple. You start in a plane at the top of the screen, whose speed is determined by the Atari console difficulty switches, a concept that later systems didn't have, but that attempted to level the playing field between experienced and non-experienced players. Here, the green player has the hard difficulty and a faster plane speed than the red player. When you press the Atari controller button, you begin to skydive. You can pop your chute by pulling down on the joystick, at which point you can then control the direction of your descent left to right, either fighting with or benefiting from the wind as indicated by the flag at the bottom of the screen. The goal is to land on the spot at the bottom of the screen, and the longer you wait to pull your chute, the more points you get. But be careful. If you wait too long, your character will spectacularly crash into the ground with a great for its time sound effect. 10 rounds per game, highest score at the end wins. This super simple concept was highly addictive for the time, and it was common in the latchkey kid neighborhood I grew up in to get a group of 4 of 6 of us together at the house of the kid that had this game, and we'd have a multi-hour tournament. We'd play a best of 3 round robin to determine tournament seedings, and then play through a best of 5 bracket until holding a best of 7 championship. None of that is built into the game, but it was how we got creative in staying out of trouble for a summer afternoon with no parents around. And if you were fortunate enough to make it into the final, the pressure sure felt like the Super Bowl. The game had 5 modes. Mode 1 had stationary platforms that were relatively large. Mode 2 had stationary platforms that were smaller. Mode 3 had larger platforms that moved. And Mode 4 had smaller platforms that would move. Mode 5 was the neighborhood favorite, and we called it Chicken, where there's one platform, the first player to land on it gets the points. So originally I was going to schedule the gameplay of me versus my millennial niece. And you're here, aren't you?
Yes.
And you're what, 35, 40 years old?
In my 20s.
Yeah, you're in your 20s. Okay, that's safe. That's fair. But because we got a unexpected spring break visit from our 21-year-old college junior, it's going to be
a cousin battle.
2 cousins fighting off. One is green, one is red. So go ahead and start for a single game Skydiver Cousin Championship.
Pull back.
No, left.
Almost. Two. Oh.
Oh. Oh, oh, oh.
That strong wind, it's hard to go back against it.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so a 5-point lead going into the final jump.
Oh, so close.
Very close end game. And that's Skydiver for the Atari 2600. The graphics and the gameplay are simple, but it's sure highly addicting and fun. What about you? What do you remember about the Atari 2600 video games from the late 70s? Comment below. Follow me on Instagram for episode previews and other nerdy things. Link in the description below. Don't forget to support the channel with a like and subscribe below. That's it for this episode, but join me next time when I look at Atari's chief, albeit distant competitor during this period, and my personal favorite console, Mattel's Intellivision, where I'll cover its best solitaire sports game, golf. Thanks for watching.